So which weapon should you equip on Arlecchino? In this video, we're just going to be ranking her weapons in a tier list based around which ones allow her to do the most damage. But before, I gotta let you know what she needs in a weapon so we both understand based around what we're ranking these weapons. So Arlecchino in general is going to be like, in terms of stats at least, it's going to be like your casual normal DPS. She's just going to scale off with attack, able to crit, stuff like that, so it's pretty simple. Also, mostly her damage is going to come from her normal attacks, so keep that in mind. So for weapon requirements, first of all, she's going to scale pretty well with attack. So any weapons that are going to give you like a high base attack or attack percentage in general are going to be pretty decent. Second thing is, it's going to be damage bonus. She's going to scale pretty well with damage bonus. She doesn't really have many sources of that. So a weapon that can give you damage bonus in general, or a specific type of damage bonus, as I said before, especially in normal attacks damage bonus, is going to be pretty good. Next thing you'd want is going to be crit rate. She already scales with crit damage, so crit rate is going to be a little bit more important to build her. And then crit damage is also going to be pretty good. So that's what you'd want on a weapon in general. Pretty much you can sum it up as being like the normal DPS weapon, but in some cases it might be a little bit different. And we're going to see that in the tier list. So now that we know that, let's move on and rank the weapons. Alright, so starting off with the 3-star weapons, first of all, we've got the white tassel. It's going to give you crit rate, and then it's going to increase your normal attacks damage bonus by 48% at R5, which you're going to be able to get it to R5. It's a 3-star weapon. That's going to be super good. Now, this weapon is going to have a pretty low base attack. It's a 3-star weapon, obviously, but the huge normal attack damage bonus is going to kind of like make up for it and make it a viable weapon. Also, the crit rate substat is going to be super good. So yeah, even though it's going to be lacking a lot in terms of attack, it's still going to be a viable weapon. So I'll put it like B tier. It's definitely going to be usable, especially at R5, which everyone should be able to get. Now we've got the halberd. That's just like attack, and then the passive is just whatever. It's just some extra damage, just straight to D tier. Black tassel is also the same thing, like HP substat relevance, and then it's going to give you extra damage against slimes, which is also irrelevant. So it's probably going D tier too. Only viable 3-star option is going to be the white tassel. Now moving on to your 4-star options. First of all, we have the Dragon's Bane. Kind of a low base attack, especially for a 4-star weapon. Elemental Mastery as a substat, and then it's going to give you damage bonus against opponents affected by Hydra or Pyro. The only thing that's kind of ruining it is going to be the Elemental Mastery substat. If it was like attack or something else, it's going to be much better, but Elemental Mastery is not going to be much needed on Arlecchino. It's still going to be appreciated, but it's definitely not something you'd want to go for, especially on a weapon, so it's going to be much better if it was something else. But even though with Elemental Mastery, it's still going to be a usable weapon, so I'd still put it at B tier. Honestly, it's probably going to be a little worse than the Black Tassel, or that white tassel, sorry. So I put it behind it, but it's definitely still a viable option to use. You're going to be able to activate the passive most of the time, and with the refinements, it's also going to get better. So yeah, if you have this weapon, it's definitely going to be usable. You've got the Prototype Star Glitter. It's going to give you energy recharge from the substat, average base attack for a 4-star, and then it's going to give you normal attacks damage bonus from the passive up to 2 stacks. Now R5 is going to be much better, but also the uptime is not going to be super like good, so it's probably not the best weapon to use. I'll put it like C tier. We've got the Crescent Pike, high base attack but physical damage to the substat, which is completely useless on Arlecchino, and then it's just going to give you additional damage, but in general it's not a good weapon, so I put it like very low C tier. It's definitely not usable. We've got the Blacklift Pole, crit damage to the substat, and then the Blacklift passive. If you kill an enemy, it's going to give you attack, but if you don't, it's not going to give you anything. The more enemies you kill, the much better. The thing is, that's going to be very inconsistent. It just heavily depends on which enemies you're going to be facing. The crit damage substat is still going to be pretty good, but in general, the weapon is going to be very inconsistent. So it can either be like A tier if you're having like 2-3 stacks, but if you're having like 0 stacks, it's not going to be as good. It's going to be like C tier. So in general, I put it at like average. Usually you're going to be able to kill an enemy, so I'd say B tier is probably the right place. So I just put it right in the middle. Now we've got the Deathmatch. It's going to be low base attack and then crit rate as a substat. It's also a pretty decent substat. It's not like very low. The passive is that it's going to increase your attack and defense, and then if there's only one opponent on the field, it's going to increase your attack more, but your attack is always going to be increased, so it's much more consistent than something like the Blacklift. You're always going to be getting an attack increase. Yes, it's going to be better if you have only one enemy, but even if you don't, you're still going to get something, so it's going to be much more consistent, which is pretty good. It's actually is going to be a pretty decent weapon, especially because of the crit rate substat. It's going to help you a lot to build Arlecchino, so I like this weapon if you have it from the battle pass. The attack increase is also going to be much appreciated. Now, obviously, it's going to be inconsistent, so I don't like that, but it's still consistent enough in my opinion. So I put it like very low A tier. It's going to be usable, especially with refinements. If you have refinements on it, it's going to be much better. But for right now, I'd say very low A tier is going to be the right place. We've got the Lithic Spear, high base attack, and then also attack as a substat, which is pretty good. And then from the passive, it's for every character you use from Leeway, it's going to give you some attack and crit rate, up to 4 stacks. Now, if you're able to get like a lot of stacks, it's going to be pretty good, but judging by like Arlecchino's teams in general, I don't think you're going to be using many Leeway characters. I think it's probably like 1 at most. It's either like Xingqiu, maybe 2, like Xingqiu and then Zhao Li, but that's like very inconsistent. Like, I don't know which teams you're going to be using, stuff like that. So the weapon in general is not going to be super good. So I'll put it like B tier 2. It's definitely going to be usable, at least if you're getting like 1 stack, which you should be able to get, as I said, like Zhao Li, Xingqiu, depending on the team. But in general, it's not too good of a weapon. Favonius is just the energy and then energy from the passive too. We don't really need that as much with Arlecchino, so probably D tier, I would say. There's not much going on for the weapon except for like the kind of high base attack, but that's it. Royal Spear, also high base attack for 4-star, and then also attack as a substat, which is much better than the Favonius. But the passive is also still going to be useless. It's just the crit stuff and stuff like that, which is completely unusable. So I'd say probably C tier. Dragon Spine Spear, low base attack, physical damage, and then the passive is just whatever, so it's D tier. We've got the Kitten Cross Spear, a high base attack for 4-star, and then Elemental Mastery is a substat, and then passive is just the energy passive, so in general, it's not that good. I'd probably say it's like D tier 2. There's not much going on for this weapon. We've got the Catch. If you have this weapon, it's going to be 42 base attack, which is average for a 4-star weapon, and it's going to buff your Elemental Burst, which is not as good, so it's probably going like C tier in my opinion. D tier actually, it's D tier. We've got Wavebreaker's Fin, high base attack for 4-star, and then also attack as a substat. The passive is also going to be buffing your Elemental Burst, which is not as good on Arlecchino, but the base stats are actually going to be pretty decent, so I'll put it as C tier. It's not going to be completely unusable, but definitely not recommended. Wound Piercer, high base attack, Elemental Mastery is a substat, and then it's just the Dendro thingy, which you're not going to be using with Arlecchino, so it's going D tier. We've got the Missive Wind Spear, average base attack, and then attack as a substat, and then when you trigger a elemental reaction, it's going to give you attack, which you're going to be able to do most of the time, and it's also going to increase your Elemental Mastery by a little bit, which is pretty good. So you're probably going to be able to have the passive at a good uptime, which makes this weapon pretty viable, so I'd say it's B tier. We've got Battle of the Fords, average base attack and then crit rate as a substat, pretty decent. The passive is that when you have 3 different elements in your party, it's going to increase your Elemental Mastery, which is kind of meh really. As I said before, it's a good stat on Arlecchino. It's not going to be like unusable, but it's definitely not something you'd want to go for, especially on your weapon. You usually just want to get a couple of substats and then that's it. But the weapon still has like decent base stats. You're going to have like, you know, average base stack and then crit rate, which is pretty good. So it's definitely going to be a usable weapon. I'll put that B tier too. Rightful Reward, that's just like HP, high base stack, but then that's it. It's going D tier. Dialogues of the Desert Sages, that's just HP and then energy, so it's going D tier. And then finally, the final 4-star weapon is going to be the Prospector's Drill, high base stack for 4-star and then attack as a substat too, which is pretty good. The passive is going to be able to give you some attack and damage bonus, which is very, very good for Arlecchino too. It's definitely going to be a very good weapon. The attack, damage bonus, stuff like that is going to be pretty good. Now, it's not going to give you any crit, so I wouldn't really say it's going to be much better than the weapons here on B tier. So I'll put it like very high B tier to it. But yeah, in general, it's still not going to be like super good. Now, finally, moving on to the 5-star weapons. First of all, we're going to have the Staff of Homa. Average base stat for 5-star, but it's going to be still like pretty high compared to any other weapon. Crit damage is a substat, which is super good. And then it's going to give you an attack bonus based around your HP, and that's going to be a lot of attack pretty much. So the whole weapon is going to give you HP, crit damage, and attack, which is pretty good on Arlecchino. I'd probably say it's going to be an S tier weapon, to be honest. It has like pretty much everything you need, so yeah, S tier it is. We've got the Skyward Spine, super high base stat, but then energy recharge is substat, which is not very usable. It's going to give you some crit rate from the passive, which is pretty good. And it's going to increase your attack speed, which is kind of meh, but it's also pretty good and usable on Arlecchino. It's also going to give you some extra damage, which is pretty good. Just for the high base attack though, this is like the most important thing about this weapon. I put it like A tier, probably lower A tier, but it's definitely still a pretty good weapon. We've got the Vortex Vanquisher. Again, average base attack for 5-star and then also attack as a substat. It's going to give you attack from the passive and then also when you're protected by a shield, it's gonna increase the passive by 100%, which means double it. So it's gonna be a decent weapon though, but you definitely gotta make sure you're shielded. Otherwise, it's not gonna be worth it to use this weapon. So when you're shielded, it's gonna be pretty good. So I'll put it like A tier 2. Now I've got the Jade Wing Spear, high base tag, higher than average, even for a 5-star weapon. Then also crit rate as a substat, which is pretty good. And then it's gonna give you attack from the passive. And then when you have the full stacks, it's also gonna give you damage bonus. So it's literally everything you need. So yeah, it's definitely going S tier. It's one of her best weapons for sure. It's even gonna be close to her signature weapon. We've got the Calamity Queller, super high base attack, like super high. One of the few highest base attacks in the game. And then also attack as a substat. It's gonna be a small substat, but it's still pretty good either way. And then the passive is gonna give you elemental damage bonus flat, which is pretty good. The rest of the passive is not as good. You probably won't be able to use it, but either way, it's still gonna be enough. So I'll put it like A tier 2. There's not much going on except for like the super high attack numbers, some damage bonus, but I don't think it's gonna make it like S tier material, but it's definitely still a very good weapon to use. So I'll put it like higher A tier. We've got the Engulfing Lightning, average base attack, energy recharge as a substat. And that's gonna increase your attack based around your energy recharge. You probably won't be building energy recharge as much on Arlecchino, so it's not a very good combination. I'll put this weapon like just for the high base attack. I'll put it like B tier, probably even like a little lower B tier. But yeah, it's definitely not a good weapon to use, especially as a 5-star. We've got Staff of the Scarlet Sands, low base attack for a 5-star, but it's still pretty decent, especially compared to like the other 4-star weapons and stuff like that. And then a huge crit rate passive, and it's gonna increase your attack based around your elemental mastery. Now you're not gonna be building elemental mastery as much on Arlecchino, so the whole passive is not gonna be like super good, but the weapon in general, the base stats are gonna be pretty good. So you know, the huge crit rate substat, you're gonna appreciate that a lot, and the base stack is still pretty decent. So yeah, I'll definitely put that at A tier 2. And then finally we got the Crimson Moon Semblance, her signature weapon, high base stack even for 5-star, and then crit rate as a substat, which is pretty good. And then passive that when you have a Bond of Life, it's gonna give you quite a bit of damage bonus, which obviously you're gonna be able to do with Arlecchino. So yeah, it's definitely gonna be a very good weapon. It's everything she needs, so it's definitely gonna be S tier 2. Attack, crit rate, and then damage bonus. To be honest, it's not worth it if you have like something like the Jade Wing Spear, but if you don't, it's gonna be a decent weapon. But yeah, either way, it's definitely gonna be her best in slot. But yeah, as you guys can see here, there are not many like free to play options for her. The best free to play option is probably gonna be like the White Tassel, which is not as good. The next best is gonna be like the Deathmatch, which is not technically free to play. It's a battle pass weapon, so I'm pretty sure not everyone's gonna have it. So I'd say her weapons in general are definitely not free to play friendly, but most of the 5-star weapons are gonna be pretty good on her. So if you manage to get any 5-star weapon along the way, especially if you've been playing for a long time, you probably do have like one of these, so you can just use it and then that's it. But yeah, that was the video guys. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video. Peace.